The other thing that I think we see in schools is that if it's not constantly there, if it's not constantly occurring, it gets forgotten because people have a X capacity for what's going on. So if we keep it relevant and keep it daily, so sending out updates every week, keeping an internal website that has information and links. When a teacher has a question, immediately offering to go in and meet with them and support them and be there for them. Doing all of those little things is making a lot of progress when I don't have full days with people.
Welcome back to the Tomo Club podcast called Leaders of Tomorrow. And today we have Michael Berry. He is the Director of Curriculum and Tech at Montpelier Roxbury Public Schools, Vermont. And this conversation today is all about real talk, real AI, and student stories. So we have been covering topics around AI for the last month or two, and we have tried to understand different school leaders' concerns, hesitation, their experiments, and something that has been backfired. But today we're definitely gonna deep dive more in what's working, what's messy, and what's next for schools to figure out AI from the ground up. And thank you so much for taking our time today, Michael.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited about this.
Perfect. So before we do this podcast about AI, first thing I always ask my guest is what got you in the education in the first place? And if you can give us a snapshot to our audience about your journey, that would be really helpful.
Sure. So I grew up in a household of educators. I think that probably had a lot to do with it. My father was a business teacher. My mother was an art teacher. My grandfather was a teacher as well. And so I think I had a natural comfort with it. But I started off as a second grade teacher and then became a kindergarten teacher for a long time. And that's kind of where I spent my time, was with the little ones. And it was probably the best time ever. I learned so much from 5-year-olds. It wasn't even funny. But I could always kind of navigate. You know how some teachers speak science very well. Some teachers speak math very well. I could always speak kind of the systems of the school very well. And so I fell into an administrative tract and was kind of encouraged to apply for a principal position up in Underhill, Vermont. And I started my principal journey there, moved to Richmond, Vermont, did some principal work there, and then soon moved to the central office and started doing curricular work. And I've kind of been in that ever since.
Perfect. No, I one thing I adore the most is how in education everyone has gone from the ground up, and it's not like you directly become a head of something without understanding the ground reality. And
That's right.
So much for the service of your entire family towards teaching so many generations of children overall. And I hope there's a long way to go and you become superintendent soon as well. If you wish for that.
If we wish for it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty happy where I am at this point, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the area of impact and the definitely goes up when you go higher up in the ladder. So
yeah.
So definitely would love to understand what's the rush, what is the overall haste that we see around schools understanding, teaching, adapting AI. What is this rush all about, as per you?
Yeah, I think it comes from a couple different directions. I think we're scared as a society by what happened or what didn't happen when social media came about.
Yeah.
I think schools will recognize and self-identify that we could have done more, should have done more in terms of preparing our students for social media. And so I think there's a rush there. There's a pressure there. I think there's also a huge divide in society between people that want their students and their scholars to really understand AI and be prepared for this new world. And then there's the opposite rush for families and caregivers that feel like they don't want their student near AI. And there's this rush to understand why that shouldn't be. Then there's also just the natural competitiveness between schools and educators that's often not talked about. But I think that when we see other schools doing innovative things and moving the needle, there's this pressure to keep up with that.
Yeah.
And then there's also just the natural pace of AI. It is moving so stinking fast
Yeah.
that even if you are doing what you can do at the moment, it doesn't feel like you're keeping up enough. So there's all these pressures that I think are interpreted by everything. But there's been a couple articles about this happened when Google first came out.
Mm.
Everyone was in full panic about kids cheating and what is this going to do, and then you've seen the memes about when the calculators came out and how math teachers were so I think there's kind of a natural societal response to things like this.
Mm.
This one feels much different to me, having lived through a few of those.
Yeah.
This feels there's more humanity at stake in the conversation. So I think that's the pressure that schools are feeling. I think that pressure, and I think you're right. It's a great question. There is a rush
Mm.
to do nobody knows what. What are we rushing to do? But we know we need to rush. And so there's a lot of pressure from a lot of different places. And I think there's pressure from the ed tech space as well
Mm.
to innovate and figure out, how are you supporting teachers? How are you supporting students? How are you supporting families? What are your like there's this rush from all directions, I think.
We're definitely guilty as for that. I think we are also creating that rush when we talk to school leaders. And there's a strong reason behind it. I love the reasoning of social media, because the repercussions, both positive and negative, were handled by school very differently. And everyone feels that they don't want to repeat that same mistake. 100% true. Also, but when I say why tech is rushing towards it, or why so many companies, and also coming to the previous point, even the school choice has also increased that competitiveness among the schools,
Yeah.
because they know that there are charter schools, they're homeschooling, so schools are not gonna definitely get student enrollment. They have to earn it. So I think that's definitely debatable. We can have for another day, but that's another reason. But why we are pushing it, because I don't think so it's anything like the technology innovations previously, because this has some ground shaking impact across the board, from employers, from industries, and even the skills relevant. Because even if I come out and say that, oh, hey, human skills like uh, emotional intelligence will be relevant, I do not know even AI can do that better. In fact, initial reports do say that the AI is going to be more patient, more empathetic, even as a doctor, even as a therapist. So
Right.
so yeah, I think the unpredictability of the extent of what this technology can bring is definitely causing a huge rush. And with rush, of course, mistakes happen. With rush,
Mm-hmm.
the repercussions can be both good and bad. And I think that is most important discussion right now happening around the guardrails, ethics, and because I think guardrails is something which is not possible, to be very honest. Rather, it has to be more ethics and more education awareness, which can still happen. Um, let's see how that goes as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but what do you think is the real reason of this hesitation? That let's talk about the first audience that you mentioned, the hesitant or on the fence audience. Is it the fear? Is it the policy? Or the unknowingness? What do you think is the hesitation of this set of parents and teachers?
I think there's a couple things. I think the first thing to acknowledge is that we've never really gotten tech integration right.
Okay.
So from the beginning, there's we've never really meshed tech with education smoothly.
Hmm.
So I think it's something that we don't need to do. But I think what the hesitation is coming from is a lot of fear, but a lot of partial information. So I see this constantly amongst folks. So in Vermont, we're quite an advocacy-based population. We like a good issue. We really like to dig in on that, and that's a good thing. What I'm seeing with AI mostly is partial information.
Hmm.
So initially, here amongst students, staff, and caregivers, there was a large reaction to the use of AI because of the environmental impacts, which
Hmm.
I agree. There are environmental impacts. What I don't agree with is just telling kids and students, hey, AI is bad for the environment and leaving it at that. This is the generation that's going to address this. So let's give them all the information. Let's talk about water cooling and how that works in data centers and the new technology about capturing that, carbon capture technology, what's needed to be able to address this. Let's give them all the information about it. And let's also be honest. As we're concerned about the environment and the impact of AI, and you have your iPhone and your Apple Watch on that is running AI 24 hours, let's be really honest about what's going on. Let's give all the information that we can. And I say that not to call people out, but to say the environmental impacts were happening long before generative AI. We became aware of it as an education society. It's been around for a while. Data centers have been around for a while. And, I've done some research on things like an iPhone running, if you have your iPhone on all day, and, you have Siri, you have Spotify, you have Netflix, you have Instagram, all of those things are running AI in the background to adjust the content that you're receiving. And your net carbon imprint from your iPhone being on all day is much less of an environmental, or is much more of an environmental impact than my 10 queries that I do in Gemini to figure out how I can unpack proficiency-based learning better with a group of educators. So I think that there's just more information to give people so that they can understand their fear and hesitation. And I don't think anyone in a mass level is doing that really well. Most people are getting their AI news from provocative headlines in the New York Times or articles like that. LinkedIn is the place where I've found the most relevant and factual-based information, good and bad, about what's going on with AI. And I just don't think as many people are plugged into that. So they're getting their information from the extremes of, really attention-getting titles in articles. And those things are happening. I'm not saying they're not happening. But there's also these other things like exploring Google's commitment to carbon neutral by 2030 and how that works into their AI and data center plan. Let's understand it. The kids that are sitting in front of us right now are the generation that are going to need to address this. Let's give them all the info. And I think that's where that's coming from. I think for caregivers also, there's this fear, and it's a genuine fear about the lack of mental health supports available to young adults and adults, and this trend of turning to AI for that support. And we've seen that go badly. And so I think there's some good things that caregivers are worried about. But overall, anytime anyone says these things to me, that just gives me more impetus to say, yeah, we really need to talk to kids about this.
Right.
We can't ignore it.
No, I absolutely love your pointers. The environmental point is great. I think why people have been ignorant to the other carbon footprint of theirs as compared to AI, because the $1 trillion getting funded in this AI is rightly visible. And then there will be a stock market impact, and people are seeing that the financial sense may not make. So if iPhone or if Apple or Google have been investing on us, they have got returns as well. But if OpenAI is investing on us, giving us this technology for $20, they have not figured out the financial, and they're only looking at scaling model. So definitely that gives a bubble vibe. And when it happens, people money is at stake, and the impact will anyways come to the end user. So I think that's very, very well put. And hesitation is right. I think any negative news spreads 100x faster than any positive news. That's how human operate in general. So, and the negative impact is rightly visible, and that calls much more proactive measures to address it and not ignore it. So, because we all know that students should be financially literate, but there was no haste to
right.
Or we
it's
know
a great example.
Students should be taught about healthy eating habits, or there should be more focus on fitness. And there are companies, there are curriculums, there are solutions out there, but they never got picked up so rapidly as compared to companies who are teaching AI or companies who are providing AI solutions. So I think
Yep.
there is definitely a disproportionate focus. Um, but that focus, if not given properly, can also cause more harm. So I have my own understanding about, AI, but I'll first stick to your understanding is, do you have any story where you think AI can actually make learning more human and not less?
Yeah, I have many aspirational stories. I have two that really stand out. We've been trying to start an AI club here at the high school, and there's been a lot of friction around that. Students are interestingly opposed to discussing AI,
Okay.
and are have a big reaction to it, which is interesting in itself. It just fuels my need to talk about it. But in talking to one student, we have a lot of localized flooding in our area over the last couple years, and he had read an article about how Google was incorporating Google Maps and Gemini to examine flood data over a period of years to identify patterns. And he went down this rabbit hole of thinking about how could he use AI and topographical maps of the region to potentially identify different floodplain areas in our town and do all these things. So I think that's a great example of a student kind of thinking, how can I leverage this technology? But one of the most impactful stories that I heard was from a gentleman named Kunal Dhanal. If you haven't had him on the podcast, you should definitely have him on the podcast. He's in the AI and education space. He's brilliant. Great guy. He told us this story, and hopefully I don't get too creative with the story, but he was trying to figure out a way to talk to his son about AI and to do it in a way that wasn't like drink the Kool-Aid, but also an opportunity to really talk about AI and have his son have a different understanding of it. And so he did this really incredibly impactful but simple thing that I thought was amazing. Each week, he would do a dream journal with his son. So his son would describe a dream that he had. And so then what they would do is they would sit down and they would enter it into AI, and they'd have AI try and visualize that dream. Now, a bunch of things started happening here. One, he's having this very human, amazing conversation with his son about his dreams, right? Which in itself is like, that's amazing. Great job. But then what would happen is his son would say, well, I had a dream about this or that. And they'd enter it in, and the description wasn't enough for AI to really generate anything that reflected his dream. So his son would say, like, well, that doesn't look like it. And then Kunal would have this opportunity to talk to him, but that's what you told it. Could we tell it more? And then maybe it will get better. So all of a sudden, his son's learning about prompting and prompting engineering and what goes into it, right? And so eventually his son starts to get better and better at describing his dreams. And they get these amazing images of his son's dream from that week or that night or whatever it was. And they start talking about it and start talking about the dreams. And what happened was they had this very human connection, and it was human driven, and it brought them close together around talking about dreams and hopes and imagination and creativity and descriptive words and all of these things. And now they have this collection of dreams. They have this collection of images. And I just thought there was something incredibly impactful about that. So the examples that really ignite me are the ones where humanity is accelerated because of that tool. That I think are what we want to tap into for educational opportunities for our students. Like how do we? I almost envision a world where we're using technology a little bit less, but when we do, it's incredibly impactful in the classroom. Like we're moving students beyond a point where they would normally top out at in their thinking in some way, shape, or form. And that story from Kunal was just, it was incredible. That just stuck with me for a long time as an example of how we should think about the opportunities in classrooms.
That's really beautiful. And I think I'm going to definitely do that once my
Yeah.
a little bit Like right now he's 2, but once he's able to share his dreams, I'm definitely gonna do that. And do definitely connect me with Kunal, if it's possible. I'll happy to
Yes,
have.
absolutely. I will
Um,
do that.
Also, I think as far as AI is concerned, um, so I used to go to University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign,
Mhm.
and over there, professors used to give us assignments which were based a lot more on our set of thinking. So they'll give us, let's say, a problem statement on a social or moral dilemma where a country X and country Y, they're producing X number of carbon emissions, and and there should be subsidies. So there was a lot of moving variables that goes inside it, including capita per capita GDP and everything. And whenever we used to answer that, even if Google can help us, it has to have our deep
Mhm.
understanding, our emotions involved in it. And then we are holding on our ground, explaining those answers. So he used to ask for assignment, but he used to never look at those assignments. He used to let us present. So I think how AI can help us be much more creative with our answers. But at the end of the day, we are going out and presenting it will be very
Yeah.
crucial. And that whether it's interaction through presentations, interaction through group activities is something that will get more felicitated. So I'll give you one more example. Like I think while growing up, I think I got my first smartphone in 2011, and before that, if anybody used to say any statement, whether it's right or wrong, whether they are just making it up, it used to go around. But my friends became huge level of Google checkers, and that made everyone so cautious of what they were gonna say because they
Yep.
know they're gonna get bashed if they say anything without doing their research. So,
Yep.
and I love that part of my group because that made me really value my words and not say anything that just comes to my head for the first time. So I think that helped me become a critical thinker, and I think AI can help us be critical thinkers even much more if we use it right. That's the
Yep.
always uh, disclaimer there. Um,
Yep. I agree with that.
but you also have to understand about the reservation of teachers, right? I think when we say that educators will become mentors and guides and they will be facilitating these conversations, and they don't have to worry about the actual content and actual learning, so it does can create some kind of panic because that's what they're trained for most of their lives. So how do you make them feel comfortable of using AI and not feel threatened?
Yeah, I have a couple rules that I operate around that. One, I've been a tech director for a while now, and I've done a lot of whole group tech trainings. And those are very difficult to do. Everyone's at a different point. Inevitably, the one person that you don't want to have tech trouble does, and it's a difficult thing. So one of my rules around this that I kind of tend to operate with is one at a time. I do a lot of one-on-one conversations with teachers. Um, I'm pretty well known to do the same training one-on-one over and over and over again, because I have a bit of a mantra about small changes still change. Training one person on one day is still one more person than I had the day before. So I see a lot more success having one-on-one conversations with teachers so that they can really unpack whatever it is that's going on for them individually in terms of, and this is true of AI or new curriculum or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, so that's one thing. The other thing is I don't think it's as much about convincing people, as it is showing people.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. So I had an educator in my office about a week or two ago who hadn't been using AI but was curious. Like,
Hmm.
here's the work that I'm doing. So we sat down together. We opened up Gemini and Notebook LM. We had the two up there, and I said, "What is it that you want to do?" And they tossed out this thing, this topic. They wanted to be able to create plans based on certain sets of research. And I said, okay, so what's the research? Let's get the research together. So we got the research together. We created a Notebook LM with the research.
Hmm.
And I showed them what was possible. And initially, their prompts were very simple, like summarize this, tell me this. And I said, what if we get a little saucy with it? What if we ask it to really push our thinking? Give me 3 arguments against the way I'm thinking. And
Hmm.
the person's was sitting there kind of like, what's going on?
Mhm.
And I asked it, and the response was incredible. And then suddenly you could see that person open to the possibilities
Yeah.
of how it could push their thinking. It suddenly, because the other thing that I think people struggle with, and certainly we see this, my friends Sean and Renee and I call this cognitive lift guilt.
Hmm.
Educators have been conditioned to associate working long, hard hours with everything that they do as what needs to be done to get it done. The stack of papers every night, whatever it is, like this idea that this is a part of their persona. So when something like this comes along that does something that used to take them 2 hours to do
Hmm.
and do it in 2 minutes, there's a guilt associated with it.
Okay.
There's this feeling of cheating, for lack of a better word, cheating the outcome in some way.
Hmm.
So what I find in those one-on-one conversations is that I have to show them that there is an element of efficiency, which I think is different than cheating.
Hmm.
And if it's pushing your thinking further than you would have gotten, and you're getting to things that you wouldn't have gotten to otherwise that are good for kids,
Hmm.
that's a different story. You need to let yourself off the hook for that a little bit. And I'm not an advocate for automating everything and shortcutting different things. I'm not an advocate for that. I think there's a true value to teachers having expertise in what they're doing, and I think that there are things that we can do better for kids right now, and we need to feel okay about that. And so in those one-on-one meetings, a one-on-one half-hour, 45-minute meeting, I can make more impact with an educator
Hmm.
towards supporting them in this journey than I can at 20 minutes at their staff meeting with 45 people looking at me.
Yeah.
And so I've really embraced that strategy
Hmm.
with supporting teachers. And yeah, it's a little slower potentially. I'd argue that the return on investment is probably a little bit better in our context here. I'm only speaking for the context in this district, but I do think that there is something to that
Hmm.
that you don't experience in a large group tech training.
That's again very wonderful point. I think where you talk about personalized training,
Mm-hmm.
that's a long way to go. And I love the concept of cognitive guilt that you've brought in. I think people talk about it, but you have finally given a term which I think makes a lot more sense and can explain this entire dilemma that a lot of people are facing. I have another theory over here. I think a lot of people are used to get up and get to work, and
Yeah.
COVID, when COVID changed things, and people felt a lot more jobless, it was hard, and a lot of people could fill in that gap with some creative things, whether they started doing more culinary or they started doing some um, teaching at home of the kids, but not everyone started enjoying that.
Right.
Similarly with teachers, that's my again personal opinion. um, a lot of them love to connect with them one on one, and they become like those favorite teachers that everyone go to, but not everyone likes that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have seen this kind of the teachers who used to love with students anyways, they're embracing AI much more quicker because they anyways don't enjoy the admin work, so
Interesting. Yeah.
they're happy to automate it and go in and talk to more kids, spend their day, and they feel more fulfilled. While on the other hand, so a lot of adults, they also don't know how to talk to kids.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit social emotional learning gap as well. um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't blame it. It's just the surroundings you're born in and the culture that you're born in, or the friends that you have or community you have. Not everyone is comfortable doing that. So when you talk to a kid, and then you have to treat them as adults, where you have to take their inputs, and you don't know, you can act as if that you don't know the answer, and you're ideating and brainstorming on it, where they feel that they are equal on the table while talking. That's not easy for adults.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I might have to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, and so I think when we talk about AI training, one thing is definitely about teaching those teachers how to use AI to free up their time, but then we also have to teach them how to use that free up time better. Um,
Yeah.
and
Well
that
said.
will be an exciting new frontier, I believe, where social emotional learning was always talked about from kids' perspective. And when we talk about from adults' perspective, it was about their social emotional learning skills with other adults. There is a third angle, that social emotional skills of adults working with kids.
Yeah.
And that will be very, I think, interesting for a new frontier.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. I like that.
So can you explain more what exactly is that AI club that you're talking about? What's the format? What's the content play? How does it function? Who are the kids who actually opted in for, and how are they feeling about it?
Yeah, we actually didn't get it off the ground.
Okay.
It was interesting. We learned a lot from the process. So we had a club fair where I had a table set up and I had information about what we wanted to do. The idea was twofold. So we wanted a group of students that we would be able to um, accelerate their voice to us as adults about what's going on with AI in education. But we also wanted that club to focus on societal impact. So picking a project, a community project that would be based in our community that would use AI as a tool to address that issue. So, and I would be the coach, and we would allow them access to a AI tool, likely Gemini. We're a Google Workspace tool school. So then at the end of the year, we're trying to mimic what North Carolina did did a great job with in terms of a student symposium, a coming together of the statewide high school students to present similar ideas to start this conversation. We're still trying to do the symposium, but that was the purpose of the club, was that this would be a group that would work towards that. At the club fair, I had a lot of big reactions from students about even being there. People came up, they were upset. They were asking me why I was there. It felt very politicized.
Okay.
And we saw these huge reactions from students about me being there. And similarly, we had a bulletin board outside my office about AI. It was just a really basic AI kind of, hey, what is generative AI bulletin board? And there were note cards. I put Post-it notes on the bulletin boards so people could leave their thoughts about the questions that were on the bulletin board. And we got a lot of very angry responses from students. And that information was very valuable to us. It told us, wow, our kids have a lot to say about AI in schools. They have a lot to say. They have a good amount of knowledge about what's happening. And some of the other takeaways we had were that there are gaps in their knowledge. There are significant gaps. The other big takeaway for us was how young people are being targeted by the media in terms of information that they are getting. So we dove a little deeper with these big responses. We talked to kids and we said, hey, where do you get your information about this? And a lot of it was TikTok, YouTube shorts, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not villainizing those things, but we know how those work. If you watch a video on a certain topic, and if it's about Elon Musk and you watch the whole thing, then you're going to get more of that content down the road. And so we started to realize and really kind of dig in on, well, what are our kids hearing from us about AI? And that's when we discovered, so we started talking to adults in the building and we said, what are your conversations with kids? And there wasn't a whole lot happening at the beginning of the year. So back to those hesitant teachers and hesitant caregivers, right? Rather than dig in and not be able to respond to the answers or questions that kids are asking, people just chose not to dig in, right? So there weren't a lot of conversations going on with students. And so I've had, your question about what AI experiments have I had. I've had a lot of failed experiments at the moment, but each one of them I've learned an incredible amount about and from. And so we've pivoted and created new experiments and new opportunities. So right now I'm meeting with a lot of people and we're building gems or custom bots for different elements of instruction and learning. And people are taking a whole lot away from that. There's a lot of buy-in for that, for lack of a better word. We're using it to create opportunities. One of the big breakthroughs for us was in translation supports for caregivers and families that require translation of documents or interaction. The live translation features in virtual meetings has opened up the world to us in terms of communicating with families. So we've been pushing in where we can. The biggest experiments I have is we're in an industry, and I don't think people get this, but let me say it. I'll say it probably twice. We're in an industry where we don't have access to our employees during the workday.
Okay.
We are in an industry where we don't have access to our employees during the workday. And in Vermont, we're facing a substitute shortage. So our opportunity to get in front of our employees and train or work on something is very limited. So my biggest experiment right now is finding new ways to work with teachers that are within the workday, embedded in the workday, not 4 p.m. on a Monday when everyone's burnt out from the day, not 20 minutes at a staff meeting that's not enough to really dig in. So my biggest experiment right now is a human one. How do I do this work and accomplish it while finding ways to accelerate student voice in that experience? So we kind of have this open offer on the table for students with the AI Club. If the students rally and want to do it, we'll pull it together. And we've offered up personalized learning plans for some students that want to dig into something like this so that they can do that as part of their course of study. So we're open right now. I feel like every day is an experiment. And every day I'm learning what works and what doesn't work. And I'm okay with that. It's working good.
Interesting. So one thing, definitely good point you said, is about the polarization, both for it's happening at adults and at kids level as well. And the polarization just deepens once you have stayed longer than required on a particular video. And the algorithm will keep on pushing more and more. So it's very difficult to keep your narrative neutral with anything nowadays.
Correct.
Whether it's good or bad for you, whether it's not even related to you.
Right.
So that's true. And very interesting, I think, experiment that you have done. And I think it's about learning from those experiments, which is constantly happening. Again, very, very strong point on the inaccessibility of teachers' time from the office. I think that's something that never occurred to me as well. Now when you said it, it feels very obvious, but it wasn't obvious without thinking about it. So thank you for bringing that up. So how, in this kind of limited bandwidth, so one thing we've established is, good or bad, we need to talk about AI. That's one. How do you use it for yourself? So I'll tell you one of my theories. So a lot of people were talking about specific AI tools or specific AI training for math, for English, for science. And I gave it a genuine thought. And I thought it's not right, because rather than having those it's like you're selling, let's say, a car for office, a car for home, a car like for different routes, different cars. And I was like, what are we going to do this for? I'm not going to have 10 cars. So what's the point? So I think that's what I thought, that rather I would develop that capacity and that understanding, that adaptability at the teachers and the kids end, so that they figure out themselves. If they want to use an AI to remodel a science experiment and try out different experiments, they should have the aptitude to prompt and use AI or various media generative AI tools accordingly. I do not need to tell them how to use AI specifically to learn photosynthesis. That doesn't make sense. I would rather teach them AI, how to use AI in general. So that's something which a lot of people again talk about, because they are math AI tutors or they are English AI tutors. I know that having that sometimes vertical specific expertise is also relevant, but I think right now we would rather be a general purpose jack for all trade rather than master for one. So that's another thought process. So I want to understand, among all this thing that we have established till now, and also limited teachers' time, and also limited teachers and parents and adults open to this, how are you going to redesign professional development for teachers in this? How are you going to plan this out?
Yeah, so we've started something called a hub and spoke model in our district. And this is based on a fellow named Spillane. He did a bunch of research about 20 years ago. My working theory is that our standard reflexive response to, okay, we have this new initiative, let's put together a committee. The committee will meet once a month after school, and we'll get this thing licked, right? So let's break that down. Once a month after school, that's roughly 6 or 7 meetings in a year.
Yeah.
Your committee members will not attend all of those meetings. And the 3 weeks in between each meeting, people will forget what you did at the last meeting. So by the time you get to that meeting, that committee meeting, you spend the first half hour trying to remember what you did at the last meeting. And by the end of the year, you've got a couple of nice documents, but you really haven't made an impact. At least that's a gross generalization of what I see happen with a lot of committees. Not all, but a lot. Now, you take something like AI that literally every day there's some new innovation. That model does not work. So the hub and spoke model is a way to think about, it's a little different for education, but if you went to a private industry, you would probably see a lot of this. So when we wanted to start an AI leadership committee. And I went through the typical thing. I started to try and find a time that all the committee members could meet. We couldn't find a time. Then we tried to pick a time after school. People had childcare concerns. They had all these other things that wasn't going to work. So what we did was a little bit different. Every Monday, and this is this hub and spoke model, I'm the hub, they're the spoke. I would send out an email that had a resource, a task, and a discussion question to the entire committee. And we had teachers, we had administrators, everybody on this. So Monday morning, they would get this email. There'd probably be a video link or a resource. In our case, I started with all the different frameworks that were out there, the UNESCO framework, all of these different things. And so they would unpack it during the week. They would think about it. They'd look at the resources, and then they'd reply all to the email thread. And we'd have this discussion as a group. And we did that for 4 or 5 weeks. And then I scheduled an in-person meeting. We got together and we had this continuous conversation as a committee with approximately 30 minutes of attention a week per member without ever having a meeting.
Okay.
And so that kind of broke the code in terms of how we get stuff done in a school where we don't have access to our teachers. And so I've kind of been building on that model in small and different ways with teachers and grade level teams, and kind of building on these small chunks of learning that are manageable. Because the other thing that we hear often when we approach teachers is that they're overwhelmed. They've got a lot going on. It's a busy day.
Yeah.
And now you want to sit down and unpack this super heavy humanity impacting idea with me. And so we're trying to figure out bite-sized ways to keep the conversation going. So lots of little bites, but moving the needle consistently. The other thing that I think we see in schools is that if it's not constantly there, if it's not constantly occurring, it gets forgotten because people have a X capacity for what's going on. So if we keep it relevant and keep it daily, so sending out updates every week, keeping an internal website that has information and links. When a teacher has a question, immediately offering to go in and meet with them and support them and be there for them. Doing all of those little things is making a lot of progress when I don't have full days with people. The latest thing we're exploring is this idea of training days. And the idea would be that I would take, because we have a substitute shortage, that's a big thing that we have here. Every day, schools are struggling to cover classes, which is not great. So the days of me being able to get 5 substitutes and having a grade level team for the day to do a training are gone. So the idea would be that I would take one teacher from each school and have a very small cohort that I would train for the day. And the fantastic thing about that is that it doesn't cripple the substitute or coverage thing by taking one person. And we have this super small cohort that can be really vulnerable in the work from across 3 different schools. So culturally, we're bringing people together that don't normally get to work with each other.
Mhm.
And if I do that 1 day a week between now and the end of the year, I will be able to train 60 people.
Mhm.
That's pretty amazing. So 60 people by the end of the year is way more than I would be able to do if I relied on the meeting after school or the 20 minutes in staff meeting or whatever it is. So really trying to flip the code on how we do professional learning, and it's all an experiment, but that's kind of where our head's at right now.
No, makes a lot of sense. I think we also have this kind of understanding where there are people representative and where they get trained first and then they are able to
Hmm.
train others, not explicitly, but more implicitly through daily activities, daily chores. Because um, I'll tell you an example. So, one of the schools that I work with, we realized that having those one-time training is important to get people started, but then the beauty lies in the follow-ups. So,
Yes.
and if the principal said a very beautiful thing, that now they're sharing prompts, they're sharing their learnings, and I could see the Google chat window, and I'm a part of it. It's blowing up. They ask questions,
Yeah.
and so I was like, she said, we got you guys in because of the initial hesitations being catered to, so that they feel they're coming from more informed place. Um, and then the next step was instigating those conversations, dropping
Yep.
some um, cool things which are easy to do. And then, of course, there will always be a 80-20 rule where 20% of the teachers will be much more um, enthusiastic, and then 80% of them are going to be, but that's fine. All they
Right.
wanted that the 100% teachers should be above a certain benchmark. And of course, it's a personal choice of your upskilling levels, which nobody can hard control. But just like everybody knows how to use computers now to a certain degree, we want similar behavior with AI, and
Hmm.
that's it. Because they're gonna schools have to buy new tools, they have to buy new technologies, even when they buy now, whether they buy computers, whether they buy lightning systems, everyone is going to talk about AI. So they should ask the right question to the vendors. They should ask the right questions. Parents are coming to them asking all sort of things. So that was a whole purpose. And I think the beauty lies in the secondary part, which you said is self or group thinking of
Yeah.
taking it a notch up. And an external vendors can only help to a certain degree. And I think that's the whole point. So lovely, I think, understanding this whole point, and I'm pretty sure people who are going to listen to our conversation will get a lot more ideas, or
Hmm.
might take up those ideas as it is, or get inspired to do something of their own. There's one last segment in our podcast that we do. It is called Blackbox Insight, where we always take up a question from a leader and pass it on to the next leader. So there's a question pass on to you by Dr. Chanel Segura. Um, she is the superintendent at Poaki Valley School District in New Mexico. And the question she asked was that how do you balance the personal and professional life and still feel good about both? If you are able to answer that.
Yeah, I feel like we're all working on that constantly, right? And I'm sometimes really good at it and sometimes really terrible at it. Um, I have the type of brain that has a hard time stopping.
Hmm.
And so I need hard habits that kind of force me to do that. So, for example, this is my cell phone.
Hmm.
I am the director of technology and I do a ton of stuff with AI, and I'm plugged into computers all day long, and I have a flip phone. Um, and that forces me to be in a place of presence when I'm not in front of a computer. Um, and, sometimes that instills a great deal of panic in me, and sometimes it's really inconvenient. Like I miss having maps a lot, but that's a hard guardrail for me in terms of forcing me to kind of operate differently outside of computers and technology. And it has helped tremendously. I also journal feverishly, so
Okay.
I still carry a paper and pen notebook around
Hmm.
and function in those ways. And I find that that helps me balance things, but I do get out of whack and I have to reset myself often, particularly with the balance with the personal life. I need to work on being more present all the time.
Love that. I think those are very, very hard things that you
Yeah.
and like tell me about it. Like I have maybe installed and uninstalled Instagram or TikTok. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
If they give that
Yeah.
data, it will be a little bit embarrassing, but it must be
Right. Right.
triple digits by now of how many times I've tried to stop myself. And I saw while, doom scrolling that, it's not a good thing to do. And then I stopped and uninstalled. But yeah, I think that's a very good point, and I'll definitely pass on your answer to her. Any
Thank you.
question that you have that you want to pass on to the next guest?
Oh my gosh. I
And
always want to, yeah, I always want people, when I meet people in education and leadership, I always want to know how they structure their day to
okay,
get the work done. I feverishly want to see everyone's calendar. What do you show me what you do? Like I want to know. I want to know how you structure the perfect day. I think that that's really interesting to see
hmm,
where people spend their attention during the day.
I'll get back to you with that answer from the next guest
Yeah,
soon. And
perfect.
thank you so much for your time, Michael. I think this has been really helpful um, and very informative.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Great job.
Perfect. Have a great day. Thank you so much.